Well, joining us now is Palestinian citizen of Israel and leader of the Standing Together movement, Sally Abed. Sally, good morning. What would a Rafah invasion mean if indeed it went ahead?
A Rafah invasion would mean invading a very, very tiny, enclosed, the most densely populated area on Earth right now as we speak. People in tents who are who are malnourished and who are sick. And it will mean definitely a continuation and an escalation of the massacre that has been happening for the last half a year. It's going to be humanly devastating for Palestinians.
I think you're absolutely right, Sally. It's such an incredibly horrible state of affairs. Israel will argue that there are Hamas terrorists there and this is the only way to eradicate Hamas. Is it not the case that Hamas, which has never cared about its own people, about the Palestinian people, is using these people essentially as human shields?
I am very tired to respond to that statement. I know you didn't mean it because you believe in it. I hope not. We understand now, not only from the last 6 months, but especially from the last 6 months, that what the Israeli army does and all these different mistakes that happened that resulted in the killing of 35,000 people, 15,000 children. We are talking about tens of thousands of civilians, is not just a mistake or a collateral damage. It's also, in many ways, the policy. It's how it works. We saw AI-based targeting that really justifies, and the criteria of how they are targeting, legitimate Hamas targets is just absolutely inhumane and against international law. I also want to say, eradicate Hamas. We all know, Benjamin Netanyahu is not delusional. He is smart enough to know that you cannot eradicate Hamas. Any military expert today can tell you that you cannot eradicate Hamas. And let's also talk about the fact that Hamas as an ideology cannot be eradicated by military solutions. We know that historically throughout the fight against terrorism in the Middle East, we know that it actually strengthens terrorism. And what we really need is new ideologies. And what we know that the extremist right, radical right in Benjamin Netanyahu's government is actually not only feeding on that extremism of Hamas, but it's also feeding it. And we know that this kind of military solutions are not only devastating for Palestinians, but are also not bringing any kind of safety for the Jewish people.
And Sally, you founded or work for the Standing Together movement. I know for the past 6 months you've been calling for the release of hostages. You've also been calling for an end to the killings of innocent Palestinians. What do you make of the talks that have been taking place over the last few days in Cairo, negotiations between the two parties to try and reach a deal?
I think, obviously, it needs to be, in many ways, the Israeli government, as well as Hamas right now, they don't have, unfortunately, the sufficient incentive to really get to those rooms in Cairo with real intentions of a deal, unfortunately. We don't know what happens in closed rooms, but what I can tell you is that pressing Israel for this for a deal, while we know that the real intention has never really been to return the hostages back home. Unfortunately, we know that because 9 days of ceasefire have saved more Israeli lives than the 6 months of fighting that costed 35,000 people to die in Gaza, and hundreds of soldiers to die in Gaza, and hundreds and thousands of people displaced in Israel, and millions in Gaza. And we know that Israel doesn't actually have a real intention to stop the killing right now, and Hamas also doesn't have the intention, especially when there are no real intentions from the side that is hegemonic, that is the controlling side. We need to understand and acknowledge the power differential.
What's the answer then, Sally? Because, you know, as you've explained from your perspective, neither side seem to be, as you say, being honest about what their main objective is. What is the answer to achieving a situation whereby there is a form of peace, or certainly a lasting ceasefire and the release of the hostages?
Absolutely. I think when we talk about intentions and real intentions and political will, we also need to talk about sanctions. We need to talk about the fact that Israel is being pressed again and again and again, pressed and begged not to, violate international law and to show restraint. While we see, it becomes ridiculous to see the amount of devastation while we beg a seemingly democratic state to show restraint against civilians, while providing them with a blank check policy without any sanctions, without any conditions, without any kind of repercussion and accountability of what they do. And I think what needs to happen to create those intentions is also really not only challenge, but cancel the blank check policy, especially from the United States.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Sally Abed from the Standing Together movement there.